All right, so I just want to go ahead and introduce Sarah. Sarah Robison, known on trail as Serendipity, is from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We met last year when she stopped in the museum after her 2021 northbound through hike. She resigned from her 15-year career in nurse anesthesia to walk from Georgia to Maine, and she is here to talk with you about what got her here, saying no to fear, and how she's living differently on the other side of Mount Katahdin. And although Sarah resides in Pittsburgh, she's also one of our newest museum volunteers, so she's going to be coming out here for 2 to 3 days at a time and helping out over at the museum. So if everyone could please give a warm round of applause for Sarah. I'm going to hang out here in case you need anything.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me okay? Welcome to my very first time speaking in front of a crowd. So bear with me. As Julie had said, I first met her when I summited Mount Katahdin in Maine. I made my way back to Pittsburgh by driving, and I didn't get to stop into the museum during my through hike. So I wanted to make it a point to stop afterwards. And we met. I became familiar with Heather Anderson, seeing her pack behind the glass and all of her accomplishments. And so it's very serendipitous and also ironic that probably the slowest person that's hiked the Appalachian Trail is intro for the fastest person that's ever hiked the Appalachian Trail. It took me 207 days. I took no time off trail. I was a purist. I saw every single blaze. I just went at a pace that felt right for my body, and that enabled me to be successful and remain injury-free. I'm here mostly to talk to you today about saying yes. A quote by Emerson really inspired me when he said, "What we fear doing the most is usually what we most need to do." Say yes to these things. For the past 10 years of my life, this is how I've been committed to living. I said yes to a life outside of a marriage that was unhealthy for me about 12 years ago. I said yes to running my first mile. I ran a few more of those. I said yes to my first 5K, a little over 3 miles. I carb loaded before that, because 3 miles is a long time. A handful of more 5Ks. I thought it was way out of my wheelhouse to do a half marathon. But I ran my first half marathon alone in Pittsburgh's rival city of Cleveland with a shirt that said Steel City. That's pretty brave.
You had to run faster that way.
Absolutely. I went on to run 2 more half marathons, one in Virginia, and then I ran my last one in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where I'm from. It was at that point in Pittsburgh, in the half marathoners are told to deviate over what's called the Birmingham Bridge, and the full marathoners continued straight. And for the first time, it did not feel good to go with the pack that was going the full distance. So I decided that I was going to commit to training to a full marathon. My first attempt at training for a full, I developed a tibial stress fracture at week 16 of my training. So just weeks before the marathon, I had to sit that out. And so what I start, I finish. So the following year, I began to train again. I actually ate vegan for 4 to 6 months, reading that can decrease inflammation, so that I could say to myself, if I get hurt again, it will not be of any of my doing. So that was in spring of 2020, and we all know what happened in spring of 2020. So a mere few weeks before the marathon was canceled. And I decided that I was going to continue to run, and I would run it alone, and I wanted to run Pittsburgh's course so that I could kibitz with other marathoners coming up this hill and that hill and the hill going into Oakland. I didn't just want to run 26.2 miles. That's not what it was about for me. Word got out that a healthcare worker was doing this during the pandemic, so KDKA News called me the night before I was about to run and asked if they could follow me around in a van all day. No pressure there. I said yes because I was afraid to say yes, because I was afraid to fail in front of an entire city. I did finish. I wasn't the fastest, I never am, but I ran every single step. I never stopped to walk, and I came in first place. referring back to the stress fracture I had during my first full marathon, my first attempt at running a full marathon, I couldn't do any type of high impact exercise for upwards of 6 months. So what was I going to do with my body? Something else I was very afraid of was watching city commuters bike to work, and I was fascinated by that. I lived 2 miles from the hospital where I was practicing at the time. And where was I going to put my lunch? What was a pannier bag? How did I clip it to my bike? How would I adjust it? What if it rained? These little things can deter us from taking any type of leap. So of course I bought a bike and I started to ride to work. And riding at 5:30 in the morning and getting that fresh air was the greatest start to my day, and it was completely empowering. I felt like I was on the top of the world. Buying that bike led an acquaintance that I worked with to invite me on a trip to ride my bicycle from Pittsburgh to Washington, D.C. via the Great Allegheny Passage and the C&O towpath. I had never ridden more than 10 miles. But I said yes. I trained all summer. Sarah, you can't do that. You're not a biker. These girls are avid bikers. Well, what is a biker? I pack my pannier bags with Evian water bottles every weekend all summer. And I made it to the White House, from my front porch to the White House on my bike. It's a little shy of 400 miles. During that trip, one of the highlights of our trip was intended to be spending a decent amount of time in Harpers Ferry, West Virginia, where John Brown's raid was, and absorbing a little bit of our nation's history. But Hurricane Michael had other plans, and after 6 flat tubes that day between the 4 of us, and no rear brakes because the mud caused my brakes to stick to my back wheel, we get into Harpers Ferry at 11 p.m. at night and had to leave the next morning at 5:30, so we never saw it in the daylight. Fast forward to the next year, this group of girls said, let's do another adventure. Let's backpack and end up in Harpers Ferry. We'll see it in the daylight. I like to car camp. I didn't exactly know what backpacking was. Where will we backpack? Oh, we'll do the Appalachian Trail through Maryland. We'll start at the Pennsylvania-Maryland border and we'll hike south to Harpers Ferry about 44 miles. What's the Appalachian Trail? I asked. So I said yes. I read lots of books. I'm a hypochondriac. I brought sutures. I brought epinephrine. I thought that I might pass away during this. I was fully convinced. Dehydration, rhabdo, broken clavicle. I actually had a living will made, and that is very serious. I was on the trail for less than 10 yards in Penmar Park, and it was a very iconic little dirt, flat, winding trail, what you would imagine a trail to look like. And it nearly took my breath away, and there stood a sign by the Mason-Dixon line that said, Maine this way, Georgia this way. I was hooked. It wasn't about the hike. It was about there's a footpath that goes nearly the length of our nation and what someone needs to do to change their life in order to live in the woods for 4, 5, 6, 7 months. I thought, I hollered out to the partner that I was with, and I said, Katie, I'm going to walk every inch of this thing before I die. But at 40, people don't quit their jobs, right? You don't put your things into storage. You need a mailing address. You need health insurance. So I thought I will do a series of section hikes over the course of my life and complete the trail. And I did that. I went out 2 more times. I picked up where I left off, and I went out for another 4-day stretch, and then I went out for a stretch of about a week and a half. I was down into Shenandoah National Park at this point. Until the summer of 2020, the 1890 row house that I was renting got infested with an army of mice. Unacceptable, right? My landlord, who I was renting from, refused to allow professional extermination to come into the home, and I, of course, put up a fight. That's a story for another time. I was evicted at 39 years old from a house I had been renting for 9 years during a pandemic as a healthcare worker. I could have fought it. I could have went to the magistrate. I stood at my kitchen island in that moment, and I thought, Sarah, this is meant for your life. Get out of here. But okay, I'm finally going to settle some roots. I'm going to purchase a home. I've been like living by the seat of my pants, traveling, but let's buy the little bungalow in Regent Square. Let's plant the tomato plants. The market's hot. I got rid of half of the things I owned. I put them into storage. I did not want to sign a lease, so I lived in an Airbnb so that when I found a home that spoke to me, I could put an offer in and move. At the same time, I became debt-free. I paid my car off. I paid my student loans off. I had a birthday. Now I'm 40. I have a cell phone bill, and I have the cost of a storage unit. I can relinquish the Airbnb at any time, and my things are tightly packed up, and it's through hiking season. The only thing in between myself and getting to the starting line was that I was petrified. On January 19th, 2021, I made the decision to design my own life. I subscribed to joblessness and homelessness at the age of 40 and gave up a 15-year career in nurse anesthesia. I specialize in neurosurgery. I put down the manual that was handed to each of us with our welcome packet to adulthood. And instead, I became the author of my own. I was not wedded to the quest itself, but instead, I became unwilling to not get myself to the starting line. Over a series of months, I grew into it, wanting it more than I was afraid of it. And when I tried to convince myself that these series of section hikes would satiate my need to do it all in one clip because it is much different, I knew that I was lying to myself. I was feeding myself with excuses. There's a difference between types of fear. I am afraid to skydive. I have no desire to skydive. I will never skydive. We don't need to force through these types of fear, but if you desire something and your intimidation of it is the only thing in between you and that thing, that is exactly what you need to do. It will change your life. I'm going to read this quote twice because I want you to absorb it. Megan Roxanne said, "I replaced the fear of failure with the fear of the regret for not trying, and everything changed." Replace the fear of failure with the fear of regret for not trying, and everything will change. And so I walked. I'll let you in on a secret. I actually do not like to hike, like at all. I went on one day hike with this gentleman right here, Joe Trebes, after my through hike because I missed the woods and I'll never be back again. It was the quest that I was enthralled with, and then I fell in love with the mountains, but it could have been a hot air balloon ride around the world. I saw a photo at the Appalachian Trail Conservancy after my first 4 days on the trail 3 years ago, and it was a gentleman who was collapsed against the sign of Mount Katahdin, and it was then I learned that Mount Katahdin was the northern terminus of the trail. You couldn't see his face, and I don't know his name. I wish I did. You could see triumph, exhaustion, his success, his relief, his disbelief, his pain, his power, his commitment, his depletion, and also his completeness, and all I was seeing was his back and the way that he was laying against this sign. And I wanted to do whatever it is that he did to feel that way, and in this case, it was hiking the Appalachian Trail. David Miller, his trail name is AWOL, and he wrote the guide that we use to navigate the trail. And I'm going to read a short excerpt from his book. When someone asks me, why did you do this? This is why. Hiking the AT is pointless. What life is not pointless? Is it not pointless to work paycheck to paycheck just to conform? Hiking the AT before joining the workforce was an opportunity not taken. Doing it in retirement would be sensible. But doing it at this time in my life is abnormal, and therein lay the appeal. I want to make my life less ordinary. Yes, I did not choose the trail. The trail truly chose me. On March 18th of 2021, I started my through hike in Amicalola Falls, Georgia. And that day, my life was ruined forever in the most beautiful way. There is no race on the trail, no gender, no age, no color, no socioeconomic status. There's kindness and there's gratitude. Even if my socks were muddy and icy and frozen, I still had socks. It was a permission to be selfish. Gratitude abound, physical and mental highs and lows every single day that cannot be mimicked here at home. It was simple. You go to the grocery store and you choose between 45 brands of ketchup. It's stressful and we always feel like we're going to make the wrong decision, but there are no decisions on the trail. You eat what you have in your bag and you keep walking. You can't unsee this beauty when you come home and you return to a world where very few have, and it is very isolating. As Kara Quinn titled her book, "Through Hiking Will Break Your Heart." When I came back to Pittsburgh after the trail, I wanted time. I could not work, weekend, work, weekend, every 3 months, maybe take a trip. That's stressful in and of itself, and do that for 40 to 50 years until I retire. It wasn't an option for me. I wanted time. We need money to feed our mouths, to feed the mouths of our families if we had them, to keep a roof over our head, and to stay healthy. That's about it. So I hacked away at the unessential. I work less because I can spend less, and I have more time, which is freedom. I work 2 days a week until 5 p.m. The rest of the time, I write, I speak, I play, I rest, I read. Emerson also said the only person that you are destined to become is the one that you decide to be. It is up to you. I had 2 successes on the trail. My first success was getting to the starting line. I succeeded the day that I made the decision to leave a life of comfort and predictability for a journey into an abyss. I won when I got to the starting line. My second success was summiting Mount Katahdin on October 11th. Your success is in the attempt. It doesn't have to be as grandiose as the Appalachian Trail. It could be having a difficult conversation with a friend. It can be refusing to be a yes person. It can be working on rumination. It can be camping by yourself for one single night, because that's really scary too. It can be leaving a relationship that you're only in because it's safe. Say yes. We also will never feel how they look. When you're a freshman in high school and you see a senior, you think that when you get there, you're going to look a certain way. Or when I wasn't running marathons and I would see a marathon runner, I thought, if only I can do that, I'll feel the way that I perceive them. And then you get there and you're still just you. You're still just vulnerable, insecure you. So I don't know how you may think that I look, but I'm not cut from a different cloth than you. We are the same. I was just as afraid, I just did it anyway. I beg you to do it now, whatever that is for you. Don't wait, the time will never be just right. There was a Nike ad campaign in the 80s that said, "Save an endangered species, yourself. There is only one of you." Thank you for listening. I'm happy to talk later. I'll be at the event at the Cider House afterwards. I do have my phone number, email, and website contact information on cards at the table where Heather will be selling her books, which I wrote throughout my journey on the Appalachian Trail. And part of the reason why it took me so long is I would take some time off in town. I essentially published a book while I was hiking, and I had never written before. And there are a couple people here today, one from South Carolina. One came out this weekend to hear me speak and is camping for her first night. A couple people from Pittsburgh have driven out, and I got to meet them through me sharing my vulnerabilities, because I feel like people have grown to trust me because I bear it all. So if you want to hear more about the hiking aspect, I detail it there, and I'll continue to write there. And I'm also volunteering tomorrow at the Appalachian Trail Museum. If you're still in town, I'll be there from 12 to 4, so you could stop in then as well. Thank you.